Hi, everyone. So we're gonna continue the workshop for today and on part 9, and we're starting module 2. Also, from the morning, I promised I'd give you the link for the illustrator's guide. You can see it here. Another way to see it is I'm just gonna show you what the illustrator guide is looking like here. Hopefully it shows. You can see it. So this is the illustrator guides, and I got the electronic copy of it. It's, it's the Illustrator's User's Guide NBC 2015 Part 9 of Division B Housing and Small Buildings, issued by the Canadian Commission on Building and Fire Codes, the National of the Building and Fire Codes, and the National Research Council of Canada. Then the Canadian Commission of Building Fire Codes is actually the commission that constituted of multiple standing committees that work on the code changes and review all the public comments related to proposed code changes and make changes to it. I participate in the process as a permanent member on the standing committee for use and egress. So you will see that the table contents, how it is set up in user's guide, is pretty interesting. It follows really the sections and the subsections related to part 9, and it keeps going with the subsections also, as and all the way till the end. So a lot of illustrations, a lot of comments related to part 9. You will see it as you have seen on what I have been showing you in the presentation. So I strongly recommend that you get this illustrator's guide as a to further your understanding of each of the provisions in the building code. So that's one recommendation. So let's continue. We have the copyright statement related to the content of the presentation, and use of it is permitted only by written permission from Jensen Hughes and the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada. These are the slides are only cues for how to use the code, how to interpret the code. They're by no means a comprehensive statement of the actual code requirements. They which you need to look at in addition to looking to the reference standards and reference tables and their interpretations. You definitely you use the information you learned today in conjunction with the codes and the standards. You don't use them independently, and the presentation is not to be used independently. It's really a guide in terms of how to use and identify and apply. So we're going to look at fire resistance, spatial separation, exterior walls construction, means of egress, and fire protection and life safety of the part 9. You have any? Okay, I'm just checking if you guys any questions. Let's get into it. So means of egress, fire protection of exits, fire protection requirements. So we're looking under 9.9, 994, 910. Crawl spaces, you've got fire protection requirements for crawl spaces. You'll see a lot of sections will be repeated because some of them will have requirements for multiple functions. You're looking at fireplaces, not fireplaces here, but it's clearances from combustible construction of masonry chimneys. So there is fire protection provisions related not just to the chimney construction, but to the clearances from combustible construction. Same thing for fireplaces. And the fire and sound resistance table at the end of part 9 is where we're going to go reference for fire resistance of certain types of assemblies that require them. Major occupancies in part 9, as we have seen, part 9 applies only to group C, residential occupancy group D. My hand is too fast. Group D occupancies, mercantile occupancies, Group F2 and F3. And we have seen that for custodial homes and care occupancies where there's sleeping accommodations for less than 10 people, uh, convalescent homes where people are mobile and they have sleeping accommodation for for not more than 10 people, we can classify them as Group C and we can look at them there. Fire resistance, we saw the definitions for fire resistance rating. Definitely the time in minutes for fire resistance. You got to differentiate now between what the fire compartment is, what a fire separation is. Fire separation, a construction assembly that acts as a barrier against the spread of fire. We've got the performance of fire resistance rating, which can be determined fire resistant testing, can ULCS was S101, or as prescribed by the code in Appendix D, or for Part 9 in Tables 9.1031A and 9.1031B. Fire protection rating. Now we can differentiate between the fire protection resistance and fire protection rating. Fire protection resistance is for assemblies. Fire protection rating is for closures and fire stops. And the closures being openings that are the doors, shutters, dampers, windows, wired glass, glass block, fire resistance glass, fire rated glass, or fire protection rated glass. There is a glazing that is fire resistance rated. So you got to make a difference between what's the fire protection rated closure glazing, which is glazing that is tested to the closure test. And we'll go and see about what are the tests that are applicable for closures, and fire resistance rated glazing, which is tested in accordance with fire resistance requirements. Fire stops, we know that the fire stops are components assemblies for between fire separation and other assemblies, or between two fire separations, which so they can be joints or materials that fill up joints between fire separations or through fire separations for perimeter or for fire penetrations, fire stop penetration systems. Firewalls, we looked at the firewalls, party walls, we looked at the fire separations. Sometimes the party wall is always required to be a firewall, and the firewall sometimes can be just a fire separation of 1 hour for certain types of residential assemblies. And the partition is always an interior wall that's only single story in height or part a story in height, and it is not load bearing. We looked at the definition of combustible construction, non-combustible materials, and non-combustible construction, which is allowed to have certain elements of combustible construction materials and elements and components that are combustible under certain conditions that can be used in non-combustible construction, and those are defined all in what they are in the definitions. Suites, we looked at the definition of suites, the secondary suites, and dwelling units, which is a unit within a dwelling unit that is operated also as a housekeeping unit. However, it has a restriction in terms of area and how it relates in area of a dwelling of the major dwelling unit. Where a fire resistance rating, if you look up 9.10.3.1, where a fire resistance rating or fire protection rating is required in section 9.3 for an element of a building, such rating shall be determined in accordance with the test methods in part 3. For fire resistance is CAN-ULCS 101. For fire protection rating is CAN-ULCS 104 for door assemblies. For CAN-ULCS 106 for fire test of windows and glass block assemblies, ULCS 112 fire test of the fire damper assemblies. The calculation methods presented in Appendix D is an option. So for Part 9, we can always use Appendix D, or the construction specifications presented in tables 9.1031A and B, so A being the one for walls and B being for floor assemblies. Taking a look at test method described in part 3. So if we are looking at part 3, where do we find the requirement for fire resistance in part 3? So let's take a look at 9.10.3.1 quickly. 9.10.3.1, where it says, so 9.10.3.1 states, where a fire resistance rating or fire protection rating is required in this section for an element of a building, such rating shall be determined in conformance with the test methods described in part 3. The calculation methods presented in Appendix D, and the construction specification presented in 9.10.3.1a and 9.10.3.1b. I've put for you some of the test methods in 3.1.8.4. If there is other test methods, you need to go back to 3.1.8.4 for their performance. So if we go to the table 9.10.3.1a, what fire resistance rating for a load-bearing assembly do I get with W12B wall assembly? So I am in table 9.1031A. So what fire resistance rating if I get a sum with assembly 9W12B?
45 minutes.
Perfect. So for a load bearing and a
For
non-load
the low bearing.
bearing, and non-load bearing.
1 hour.
Perfect. Everyone else follows on this one? Okay. So what the way the tables are set up is that they have a generic number. You will see like here we have W13, which got a description of the assembly, and then variation of it with suffix A, alphabetical suffix, so A, B, C, D, and then you have notes at the end of the table. It's very critical that you read what's the main assembly designation is. W is being for walls here. Um, and it says it's related to wood studs, 2 rows on separate plates, load bearing or non-load bearing, and they show you the illustration of it. And then once you read this whole information, and then you go into what are the different variation you get on it. In this one, I'm using, instead of 1-layer gypsum, I'm using 15.9mm type X gypsum board. Okay, so 1 layer of 15.9 type X gypsum board with 89mm thick absorptive material on each side. You see here, we see that the notes, we go to the notes, I see note 7, and I'm seeing 8 and 10 here. So it's this type of assembly is going to be filled with thick absorbent material, and then I'm going to I have 15 type X gypsum board. So if I'm using W13C, what do I get with W13C in terms of fire rating for load bearing and non-load bearing? What's the fire resistance rating?
1 hour for both.
1 hour for both. So if you're looking for, if you know what you want to use, whether steel, concrete, masonry, or wood framing, and you want to have a wall, and you know whether it's load bearing, non-load bearing, you can go to table 9.10.3.1a for a wall, and you look for the descriptions of the wall. You look at the variations of the wall that fit your wall, and whether it's depending on load bearing and non-load bearing, you can tell what fire resistance rating is going to give you. And if you want to increase your, if your fire rating is more than what the table gives you, you look at the next nearest type of variation until you get to the right fire resistance rating, and from there you can reference the fire resistance table number and assembly number onto your drawings, and that would be one way of doing it. This one 9.10.3.1b is for floors, floor ceiling assemblies. Again, I see here I have wood framing. I can get either plywood, what is that, subfloor of plywood, OSB, or wafer board. I get on wood joist or wood eye joists. So you see here the eye joists here. You see wood joists here. not more than 6 and you know you can tell what's the spacing, not more than 600 millimeter on center. You got your subfloor with whether you're using then it has variation with or without absorptive material in the cavity, one layer of gypsum board attached directly to the joist on the ceiling side. I've got resilient metal channels and with another layer of gypsum board. So if I'm looking at that assembly F7, F7A gives me what kind of rating for fire resistance rating? F7A. Anyone? F7A, floor
1 hour.
assembly, 1 hour, thank you. And you see that this is the same table that we used when we were identifying the STC rating for assemblies. So at the same time, you can see your STC rating. You can also identify your fire resistance rating. So you can do those together and not in when you're looking up the the fire resistance in STC, whether for a wall assembly or a floor assembly, and depending on the construction type you want to use. So the part 9 only rarely tells you that to use non-combustible materials. You can use any type of construction for part 9 buildings unless otherwise specified. In for your specifically your firewalls, your party walls, fire separation, separating two buildings, definitely the non-combustible materials. However, you need to look up some other conditions that gives you those. Fire resisting tables are specified in section 910.8 and table 910.8.1. So look up subsection 910.8 and table 910.8.1. We look for major occupancy C. The building maximum height is 3 stories. It's 45 minutes for floors and mezzanines that are counted as stories. Roofs supporting occupancies and floors over crawl spaces meeting the provision 910.8.9. And when we look that up. Mezzanine floors, fire resistance ratings 45 minutes. And roofs, there is no fire resistance rating. All other occupancies up to two stories is 45 minutes for floors, no rating for mezzanines or roof. For all other occupancies that are up to 3 stories is 45 minutes floors, mezzanines counted as a story and not counted as a stories. Except also in this case, the roof is also required to be provided with 45 minutes, except the no rating is required if the building is sprinklered in conformance with 910.8.2. So what is the condition of crawl spaces 910.8.9? Let's take a look at 910.8.9. What does it say? The floor above of the crawl space over the crawl space 910.8.9. Sorry, I'm going to put some lighting on. 910.8.9. Can someone tell me what's the condition for where a crawl space exceeds 1.8 meter in height or is used for any occupancy or as a plenum in combustible construction or for the passage of flue pipes? It shall be considered as a basement in applying the requirements of Article 910.8.1. Okay, so where a crawl space exceeds 1.8 meters. So, or is used for any occupancy, or as a plenum in combustible construction, or for the passage of flue pipes. It shall be considered as a basement, and the floor above it, floor over it, needs required a fire resistance rating, similar to floors. So, is that clear? Okay. 910.8.2 is an exception for not providing fire rating for the roof of 3 stories buildings that are not residential buildings. There is exception for it. It's 910A2 if the building is sprinklered and the sprinklered and monitored, and you've got some requirement in 910A A2 that states the sprinkler is electrically supervised. The operation of the sprinkler system will cause a signal to be transmitted to the fire department in conformance with sentence 32471. So there are specific conditions for the sprinkler installation that need to be meted in accordance to 910A2 in order to avoid rating the roof. Okay. Down. Application of 10.9.10.8.1. So the provision of that table does not apply to a dwelling unit that has no other unit above or below it. So that's houses. A house with secondary suite where the floor framing is protected on the underside by a continuous smoke-tight barrier not less than 12.7 millimeter thick gypsum wall. So a house with a secondary suite where the floor framing is protected on the underside by a continuous smoke-tight barrier not less than 20 smoke-tight, or so you either provide a smoke-tight barrier, so it's a continuous barrier, or you put a 12.7 millimeter thick gypsum wall. A dwelling unit that is not above or below another major occupancy. So as long as you don't have other major occupancies, you can the dwelling unit that may be two different dwelling units that do not have other major occupancies with them. So additional fire resistance rating and fire separation provisions. I've highlighted for you the areas of the code that address fire separations. 9.10.9 fire separation and smoke tight barriers between rooms and spaces within buildings. 9.10.10 service rooms. 9.10.11 firewalls. Subsection 9.10.12 prevention of fire spread at exterior walls and between stories. And 9.10.13 doors, dampers, other closures and fire separations. So these are all sections that pertain to those requirements. The beautiful thing is in the NBC Illustrator's Guide, they've given us a table 910A where they have listed the minimum fire resistance rating for fire separation in various locations in subsection 9.10, 9.10.9 and subsection 9.10.10. So we know for private residential parking garage, there is no fire resistance rating. In parking garages for up to 5 cars, 1 hour. For more than 5 cars, 1.5 hour rating. Repair garages is 2 hours. Individual residential suite, 1 level is 45 minutes. Individual suites, residential suites with 2 or more levels, they require 1 hour fire separations. I don't know why they keep incinerator rooms. Fuel-fired furnace and boiler rooms 1 hour, and then there is no separation required. You look at the footnotes here and make sure you read them. Rooms for temporary storage of combustible refuge is 1 hour, unless footnote 2, you can reduce it to 45 minutes if you have sprinklers. Let's see, or the floor rating is 45 minutes. Other service rooms, 1 hour. Public storage rooms in residential occupancies, 1 hour. Again, you can reduce them by applying footnote 2. Public corridors, 45 minutes. And 4, no fire separation rating is required. In non-residential occupancies, the floor area is sprinklered for public corridors. For exits, it's 45 minutes. Must not, but still, if the requirement is for the floor above the fire separation, if you have major occupancies between them, then you'll take a look at the major occupancy separation, and then you see that you require a higher fire resistance rating for exits.
Excuse me, where is this table? What
That's
page?
it's illustrated user's
Oh,
guide.
it's illustrated. Okay, sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we done that. A party wall. We looked at the party wall before when we're subdividing the buildings. But we said that the party wall is always a firewall, except as allowed provided in Article 9.10.11.2. A firewall is not required to be constructed in accordance with the provision of 9.10.11.3 and or for firewalls in 3.1.10 if the separating residential occupancies, and then it can be constructed as a fire separation of not less than 1 hour fire resistance rating. When a party wall separates two dwelling units where there's no dwelling units above another, a dwelling unit and a house with a secondary suite including their common spaces, two houses with a secondary suite including their common spaces. A party wall separates two adjacent houses with a secondary suite from the rest of the building shall be constructed as a firewall to create separate buildings, each containing no more than two adjacent houses with a secondary suite. So if you have more than two houses, then it's a party wall, needs to be constructed as a firewall. The wall described in sentence 1 shall be continuous from the top of the footings to the underside of the roof deck. So that's when you're using the fire separation. Any space between the top of the wall and the roof deck shall be tightly filled with mineral wool and non-combustible material. So when you're subdividing residential units, and to create multiple row housing of single family dwellings, you can use the 1 hour fire separation, and there is specific requirements related to it. So this is a firewall construction, and this is the junction between a firewall. There are specific requirements related to construction of firewalls and junction of a firewall with combustible construction. Uh, this one is so any question on this? We've looked at it before. We're just reviewing concepts.
I actually have a question about I asked this earlier in the chat, but I don't think you saw it. Houses or house is not a defined term.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between, or how do we know when it's a house or a dwelling unit? Because it's talking about two houses. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, a house is a dwelling unit. A dwelling unit can be located in apartment buildings or multiple stories. A house will have a single, typically it's an independent construction. You can look up so every house is a dwelling, but it's not vice versa. Does it make it clearer for you?
Okay, I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah. So you use the dictionary's definition, unless, but then every city, town, municipality will have definition of house and what this constitutes as a house. So look at the property standards, zoning standards for definitions first of what is constitute a house, and then for the purpose of the codes, that the house it's a one type of a residential occupancy that is not constitutes only one independent unit, and it's not connected to other houses, to other dwelling units. Okay, so now we have, okay, so we looked at this. So these are in construction of firewalls. There is lots of guidance on it in Illustrator's guide, also in the notes to part 3, as well to the notes in part 9 for firewalls. So it needs to be continuous all the way to the exterior of the building, especially if you've got combustible material terminating at a firewall. Now, there's also fire blocking requirements in part 9, and in this case, in 9.10.31, I purposely did not put in the provisions. Let me see here, 9.10.31. And I prefer to put the illustration for you because it gives you idea of where the fire blocks are typically located in a house, and this is from the Illustrator's guide. And actually, it's not in the in. So the fire blocking requirements are provisions under 9.10.8. Let's see where it is here. So in fire separations, And fire preservation service rooms, prevention of exterior walls. I'll get the provisions for you for the fire blocking, especially when okay, flame spread. Okay, 9, 10, 16. So 9, 10, 16 is the provisions related to fire blocks. And as you see here, you'll see the different types of fire blocking that are used, required in different areas of the building. Okay. So for exact provisions and specific provisions, it's in subsection 9, 10, 16. And there's specified types of materials to be used as fire blocks, and 9, 10, 16 gives you the type of materials you can use them. And this would, this illustration gives you both location as well as type of materials that you can use. Now, again, the illustrator is a guide for actual requirements. Go to the code section, code subsection that is applicable to those provisions. Do not just rely on the guides. It's a manual. It's a helpful manual that you can that gives you a lot of explanations and illustrations of the concepts. But in terms of actual code requirements, you gotta go to the code subsections and the code language to know exactly what to do. So that's for fire blocking. We did fire separations, we did firewalls, we did illustrator guides in terms of fire resistance rating requirement for various separations. Let's see, 9, 10, 9, just quickly, if you go to 9, 10, 9, if you look at the headings of 9, 10, 9, and I'm gonna try something here, hopefully it will work. Escape. 9, 10, 9. And we're gonna go to 9, 10, 9. Next. I have the electronic copy of the code. So 9, 10, 1. You've got here, you see the fire protection of exits and fire separation of exits. Okay. You have one, what do we have here? 9, 10, 9, 3, 9, 10, 9. Okay, so this is 9, 10. Fire separation and smoke tight barriers between room and spaces within building. Always read application. This section applies to the fire separation between rooms and spaces in buildings and smoke tight barriers required in houses with a secondary suite, including their common spaces. So we saw that the smoke tight barriers is a continuous construction or using the gypsum 12.7 millimeter for walls. Let's see, continuous barriers. So the continuity, it talks about continuity of the fire separation or smoke tight barriers. Specification related to the material, the gypsum board, the openings protected with closures. Floor assemblies, all floor assemblies shall be constructed fire separations, except in dwelling units and floor assemblies where you don't require fire resistance rating, and mezzanine is not required to be counted as stories. They don't need to be constructed as fire separations. And then we looked at that when a crawl space is constructed, is not required to be constructed as a basement, then the floor it does not need to be required as fire separation. This is another reference for interconnected floor spaces. Interconnected floor spaces shall conform to subsection 328. So again, interconnected floor spaces, it's a reference to 328. If you're testing a penetration, a fire stop, a joint system is CAN-ULC 115, fire test of fire stop systems. And these are the provisions related to penetrations of fire separation 910996. The combustible drain, waste, and vent piping. Combustible construction. This is a lot of people ignore this one. Combustible construction that abuts on or is supported by non-combustible fire separation shall be constructed so that its collapse under fire condition will not cause collapse of the fire separation. So if you're building a fire separation and you have a requirement for a fire separation and it's a non-combustible fire separation, and then you've got combustible construction and it's supported, it abuts onto the non-combustible fire separation, or it's supported by the non-combustible fire separation. So you don't want that combustible construction to cause your non-combustible fire separation to collapse prior to achieving its fire rating. So it's fire separation for the time it's allocated. So when you're doing mixed type of construction, it's always critical that you make sure to separate the combustible construction somehow so that its collapse will not cause collapse of the non-combustible fire separation. And of course, here we've got all the separation provision related to fire separations. Here, this is what I wanted to get to, 910, 911, separation of residential occupancies. You saw the table. This comes, the table summarizes for us the requirements. But again, we have separation, all residential occupancies shall be separated for all major occupancies. So this is major occupancy separation in part 9. By having a fire resistance rating not less than 1 hour. A major occupancy classified as a residential occupancy shall be separated from other major occupancies classified as mercantile medium hazard occupancies by fire separation having not less than 2 hours. Where not more than 2 dwelling units are located in a building containing a mercantile occupancies, such mercantile occupancy shall be separated from a dwelling unit having by a fire separation having not less than a 1 hour fire resistance rating. And then residential suite industrial building, separation of suites. Each suite in other than business and personal service occupancy shall be separated from adjoining suites by a fire separation having fire resistance rating not less than 45 minutes. And sprinkled building suites of business and personal service occupancies and mercantile occupancies that are served by public corridors are not required to be separated from each other by fire separation. And then we go on to separation of residential suites, separation of public corridors, storage garages, repair garages. And then we talk about where a vertical space contains an exhaust duct that serves more than one fire compartment. The duct shall have a fan located at or near the exhaust outlet to ensure the duct is under negative pressure. Individual fire compartments referred in sentence 1 shall not have fans that exhaust directly into the duct in the vertical space. Central vacuum systems shall serve not more than one suite. So and goes on. So under 910, you will see a lot of the fire resistance requirements. So I'm going to go back to my presentation. And here, yay, it worked. I like that. So I like seeing the code sections rather than looking down. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Go ahead, Morgan.
The 910, 911 separation of residential occupancies, the one that said separated from other major occupancies classified as medium hazard industrial, is that a storage garage?
No, a storage garage. We said it's an F3.
Oh,
Medium
that's low
hazard
hazard.
is,
Okay.
yeah, it's low hazard. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. A repair garage, you'll see there's specific provision for repair garages. But remember, if some of you did not participate in part 3, if you go to the notes of volume 1, you will see a list of occupancies. Let's see, division A, no notes. Where I have my notes here. Okay. So if you look at the notes to for the occupancies under part 3 of volume 1, where do I have all my occupancies? Yeah, and the notes A3, what is that? A3121. If you look at 831211, that's in volume 1, page 3208, or nearby for the binder. So note 831211, volume 1. Morgan, you see all the listing for the different types of occupancies. So we've got different types of occupancies listed.
Yeah,
Under
thank
group
you. I
F
forgot
and
that
all that.
from last time.
Yeah,
I see
yeah,
that now.
yeah. So if for those who were not with us last time also, this would be a good reference to go back to look up the occupancies, the type of occupancies that fall under each group and in each division. Okay. All right, so we covered that. Spatial separation, exterior wall construction. So we're looking at 9, 10, 14, and 9, 10, 15 of the part 9. Let's remember some of the defined terms. We've seen them in part when we did part 3, but let's go over them again. Limiting distance is a limit distance from an exposing building face to a property line, the center line of a street, lane, or the center line of a lane, public thoroughfare, or a street, or to an imaginary line that we set between two buildings or fire compartments on the same property measured at right angles to the line exposing of the building face. All right. So when we talked about setting the imaginary line, normally it's midway between two buildings on the same property. Or, however, if we have we want to set the imaginary line at a different location, we need to make sure that we put that into the documentation and make sure that the authority having jurisdiction is okay with that, because we don't want to come in the future and somebody starts building up over the imaginary line saying, nobody told them so. So it will go onto the deeds, and there will be some legal agreement to make sure that the imaginary line is set physically on paper and between the two buildings for the purposes of the construction for setting a limiting distance between two buildings on the same property, or otherwise it would be the distance to the property line, or to the if there's no building next to it, but there is a street or a lane or a public thoroughfare, then you will set it to the center line of the street. The street, any highway, road, boulevard, square, or other improved thoroughfare 9 meter or more in width that has been dedicated or deeded for public use and is accessible for fire department vehicles and equipment. Fire department access roads that meet the provisions of fire departments, provision for fire department access roads in part 3 can be also used for the purposes of, of setting the exposure for limiting distance. Unprotected opening is a doorway, window, or any opening other than those equipped with a closure having the required fire protection rating. Remember, we said closures when fire separation require a fire protection rating, or any part of a wall forming part of the exposing building face that has a fire resistance rating less than that required of the exposing building face. So if we have an exterior wall and that exterior wall it does not have a fire resistance rating, then that's basically a full unprotected opening. If you have partially the wall have partially the fire resistance rating, another part of it is unprotected, then that part would be the unprotected opening. If you have a doorway, if you have a wall and then it has a fire resistance rating and it's got a doorway, a window, or an opening that does not have a closure, then it does not have the required fire protection rating. It would, in this case, if it does not have the fire protection rating for the fire separation, then it will be also considered an unprotected opening. The exposing building face is that part of the exterior wall of a building that faces in one direction and is located between ground level and the ceiling of its top story, or where the building is divided into subcompartments of at least 45 minutes fire separation as required by the code. The exterior wall of a fire compartment that faces one direction. So that's the exposing building face. The exterior walls, it's the exterior walls of a building that face in one direction. They're located between the ground level and the ceiling of the top story, or the ceiling above if that ceiling is if the building is divided into fire compartments of at least 45 minutes fire separation. So 9, 10, 14 looks at spatial separation between buildings, all buildings. If you look at spatial separations between houses, you go to 9, 10, 15. Now 9, 10, 14 is more conservative than 9, 10, 15. 9, 10, 14 is more conservative for 9, 10, 15. And in terms of provisions, the maximum permitted unprotected openings can be determined based on the following. And this is where we see options of going either to Table 9, 10, 14, 4A for building other than houses, Table 9, 10, 15, 5.4 for houses. If you conform to 323, so you can go actually to 323, Part 3 for calculating maximum permitted unprotected openings, which 323 because it's got tables for unsprinkled buildings that are very detailed, you might want to go to them. Or where the limiting distance is not less than 1.2 meter, you can do a quick estimate that for unprotected opening not to be greater than the square of the limiting distance, and for group C, D, and F3, and for group E and F2, it's equal than half the limiting distance squared. So there is a rough estimate, which is very conservative. This one. Page up. Okay, so this one is pretty conservative. This is very conservative here. Section 3239, okay, 9, 10, 14. It could be not as conservative as this, but it is less conservative than 323. So 323 is the one that if you want to go to very if your areas and length of the building and you want to maximize your openings, you might want to go to it. 9, 10, 14, 4 gives you also those provisions. For houses, you definitely want to go to houses for 9, 10, 15, 5, 4 because it's got the most flexible provisions for it. An unprotected opening for a house is actually glazed areas. They don't talk about maximum unprotected openings. They talk about maximum, glazed areas. So in terms of illustrations, we've got in illustrated user's guide. It gives us provisions for limiting distance, where in this case, you've got different sentences where the extensions that are allowed towards the property lines, how close you get to the property line, and how far you project, and what limiting distances relate to that. So the location and protection of projection of roof soffits. So once you set your property line, and that's where you set your limiting distance, you're looking at where your projections are allowed versus not allowed. When you're looking at estimating, this is 9, 10, 15, 4 2A. So 9, 10, 15, 4 is related to houses. You can look at the house from different section of the house. They don't need to be fire compartments. You look at each portion of the house and you look the limiting distance for that. Unlike other buildings where if you have openings, if you have an opening here and you start looking for if you have your wall here and it continues, this is basically your limiting distance is 0.4, and you take that as the limiting distance for the whole wall. But for houses, even though there's no fire compartments here, then you need your limiting distance. So based on this is an illustration. This is from the notes, okay? You see it says figure A9, 10, 15, 4 to A. So this is a staggered wall of a house. And for each wall, you take a separate limiting distance and you look at, and they give you the provisions based on the requirements of the different sentences of 9, 10, 15, 15, 5. Let's see, what are the other concepts? So you've got the rating of the wall, you got the cladding, you got permitted glazed openings, and permitted maximum aggregate area of glazed opening. So at 0.4 meter, there's a 45-minute resistance rating required for the wall here. The cladding must be non-combustible. Here, the cladding, actually it's here, the cladding is outside. The permitted percent of glazed opening is 0%, and aggregate is 0. Here, in this wall, I don't require fire resistance rating. There's no limit set for the type of cladding to be used on this portion of the wall. And here, the permitted aggregate area of glazed opening in this wall is 0.50 square meter. Here, based on limiting distance of 2 meters, I even have more allowances. So no requirement for fire resistance, no limits on type of cladding to be used, 11% glazed openings, and 1.58 meters of aggregate area of glazed opening. So this illustrates for you the application of the provisions related to exterior exposure and construction of exterior wall based on limiting distance and maximum number permitted in the percentage of glazed opening.
Sorry, may I interrupt? I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I think that table that you just showed, previous one, it's really great and helpful. However, is there information like that that's in this code that kind of combines all these different aspects that we have to look at in terms of the limiting distances, the combustible or non-combustible constructions and so on? Or we have to look through a variety of different tables in order to extrapolate that information?
Okay, so this is one example, right? So, but what you need to do is look at the code, and this is where you're gonna take a look at the code 91050. So this is 91014. Okay, we set the okay. This is the basically for residential buildings, personal services buildings, group C, B, and F3. This is for group E and F2. You look at the maximum area of exposed building face or fire compartment if separated from the rest of the building by 45 minutes fire separation. So the maximum exposing total area of the exterior wall, you do it for each exterior wall. And you look at the distance for the limiting distance. So the distance to your either imaginary property line or to the property line. And that's your limit. If you look at the different maximum, the maximum here, so it's up to 1.2 meter. It's 1.2 meter or less. So, and you've got an area of 30 square meter exposing face. So you're permitted 7% of maximum unprotected opening. Based on that, you come to this table here. So we said 7% for 0 to 10%. For residential building business, 0 for 10%, you've got minimum required fire resistance rating is 1 hour. Your cladding, your type of construction for the exterior wall is non-combustible, and your required of the cladding required is non-combustible. So you really have to use 9, 10, 14, 5A and 9, 10, 14, 4A for together. And there is always exceptions related to the construction of the exposing building face. So at the end here, you've got here some provisions related to requirements of the codes for certain types of limiting distance, whether it's the building is sprinklered and all that. So
Okay, that explains. Thank you.
yeah, so these are the provisions. And same thing for houses. For houses, it's even more simple to determine it for the houses, where you look up for the distances, you've got the percentages, And then for the percentages, you've got for the, you just have provisions here 9, 10, 15, 5, where it tells you about the construction of the exposing building face. So you just have one table to look at, and then you look at the provisions of the code for related depending on the on the maximum permitted glazed opening in the exterior wall of a house, and that's how you do that. So in the illustrated user's guide, here I'm illustrating for you. It's a useful illustration. It's how you calculate the percentage area of glazed opening exposing building face. So I've got glazed openings for a house. So you see that the door does not count. You only count the glazed opening for the house. For other than houses, for other types of buildings, the door, if not fire protection rated, it's the whole door that counts. Okay, so but for houses, it's only glazed openings, and of course openings themselves. If so, that's how you look at it in terms of maximum permitted glazed openings.
Sorry, Amal, I also
Yeah,
have a
go ahead.
question
Go ahead, Jack.
relating to the definition for the term streets. While you were talking about the streets
Yeah,
having more than 9 meters width,
yeah.
so does that mean when we're having lanes, which they're normally less than 9 meters in width, so in
Yeah,
that situation, the limiting distance is going to calculate it up to the property line, right? Not in the center of the street.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Now, like the streets, we have provisions that would allow the streets to be considered for exposing building face. That the fire department streets used for access of fire department may be considered, but they have to be designed in accordance with Part 3 for fire department access roads. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Means of egress. So now we look at the means of egress that's in section 9.9. You've got the general 991, the type and purpose of exits, the dimensions of means of egress, the fire protection of exits, obstructions, the doors in the means of egress, the access to exits, exits from floor areas, egress from dwelling units, egress from bedrooms, signs, and lighting. So some provisions related to that: stairways, handrails, and guards in a means of egress shall conform to the requirements in section 9.8. Which we saw earlier this morning, as well as to the requirement of section 9.9. So 9.8 is the general requirement for doors and stairways, and windows. So take a look at requirement for stairways, handrails, guards, and means of egress that in both 9.8 and 9.1. The occupant of a floor area or part of floor area shall be the number of persons for which the such areas are designed, but not fewer than those determined in table 3.117.7 unless you have designed an area for fewer persons, or if you have, in case of bedrooms, it shall be based on 2 persons per bedroom or sleeping area for dwelling units. So for those of you who were not with us during the presentation on part 3, we looked at the determination of occupant load, and the occupant load is based on the use of the area, and that use of the area has associated occupant load factors per area for a person. If you don't want to use the table, and that's in table 3.117.7, if you don't want to use the table, you can assign the area a certain maximum number of people, and you design the building or the area for that number of people. So that's the occupant, because that's going to impact our egress number, egress doors, and number of exits for other than houses in terms of designing buildings. So any question on this one? Does anybody want to see table 3.117.7 again? Okay, good. 9921, 9924, means of egress types of exits. An exit from any floor area shall be one of the following used singly or in combination. We get that quite a bit in terms of questions. Yeah, you can combine different types of exits. You can have an exterior doorway, exterior passageway, an exterior passageway, an interior exits leading to an exterior passageway, exterior ramp, exterior stairway, a fire escape, a horizontal exit, an interior passageway, an interior ramp, or an interior stairway. Fire escapes, be careful, shall be only used on exits as exits on existing buildings, shall be designed and installed in conformance with subsection 3.47. So this one is only for existing buildings that they have those, and you're not using them for any other purposes. You don't use them on new buildings. Where a horizontal exit is used, again, this is another reference to sentence provisions in part 3. It shall conform to 34161 and article 34610. So no more than half of the exits can go, not more than half of the required exits can be used for a horizontal, not more than one horizontal exit can be used. And one exit, let's see, at least one door at every principal entrance to a building providing access from the exterior at ground level shall be designed in accordance with the requirement of exits. That does not apply to houses with secondary suites or single dwelling units. So your door, you don't need, if the door for your principal entrance, your dwelling unit or to the house does not need to be designed as an exit. However, the entrance door for every principal entrance to a building for other than the houses and single dwelling units, you need to design it as an exit. Here, provisions, this is a note. It's an illustration of openings of exterior wall of exits, and you need to protect them. So you need, the protection is where it is required and where it's not required. So if it's the distance here, you will see this. I'm gonna go with my highlighter, please, highlighter. Come on, come up. Page up. Okay. My highlighter is not coming up. Okay, maybe it's tired. All right. All right, so what we'll see here is you need to protect your exit. Even though you're going out of your building, page up, you're pretty far from, you're more than 3 meter and you're more than 135 degrees. There's more than 135 degrees angle between the two walls, so you don't worry about protecting your exit here. Here you are at less than 135 degrees, but you are more than 3 meter, so you don't need to worry about the protection. Here you're less than 135 degrees, so definitely you need protection. And here you're more than 135 degrees, but less than 3 meter, you're definitely requiring protection. So so even the illustration have mistakes, but so here we're at less than 3 meters. So that's an illustration that you need to make sure that not only the exterior exit needs to be protected in the interior of the building, but when you go out the building, you want to make sure that the openings of the walls of the exits are also far from the openings of the buildings or unprotected openings in the buildings. If there is no openings, you don't worry about it. If there are openings, you want to make sure that they are protected. The clear heights of exits, minimum clear heights and exits and access to exits shall be 2.1 meter for storage garage. This can be reduced to 2 meters. So this is in from 9934 and 9962. The minimum clear opening height of doorways shall be not less than 2.03 meters at exit doors. Doors that open into or are located in public corridors, doors that open into or located within facilities that provide access to exits from a suite. The minimum clear height under door closures and other devices of the doorway shall not be less than 1.98. So the clear opening height of the doorway is 2.03. Clear height under the door closures, other devices in the doorways, it's 9.98. The above provisions do not apply for doorways serving single dwelling units or a house with a secondary suite. The minimum clear door opening width of exit doors. Again, doors that open into are located into public corridors, and doors that open into are located within facilities that provide access to suites. Clear door opening not less than 8.8 meter for single leaf doors or single active leaf of double doors, and not less than 12.10 millimeter for double active leaf doors. These do not apply to doorways serving, again, single dwelling unit or a house with secondary units. The active leaf opening width shall not be less than 8.10 millimeters. For doors with both active leaves, the width shall not be less than 6.10 millimeters. And this is an illustration of a clear width of a door. And I think we had a question on that before. And required width of the door. So minimum width and minimum clear width. And you see how these are measured. Now, in some provinces, the clear width is measured differently than this, and I want to caution you on that. There's different interpretation of how you measure the clear width, and some provincial authorities have a different interpretation. But in the NBC, this is the way that they intend for those to be applied. Okay. This is from the illustrated guides, figure 9.99. Let's see. This is when you're exiting. This is the swinging of the egress door, and this is why it's important to know the occupant load of different areas. In suite A, the occupant load is less or equal to 60. Your door can swing to the inside of the room. And now the second suite, we've got occupant load again is less than 60. Your egress door can swing into the inside. Here I've got suite C, it's got more than 60 people. Both doors need to, it's requiring 2 doors, and both doors need to open to the outside. If you've got double doors in the corridors, they need to open in directions leading to, in opposite direction to leading to exit. So this is you see it, exits all the time. They will have the door opening into the direction of exits, and here's to the outside, you're going to the outside. So the swing, direction of swing of the doors, whether for exits, whether for egress from roofs, whether in the middle of the corridors, there's provisions related to it. Okay, egress from houses. Okay, travel limits on exits or egress doors for dwelling units with more than 1 story. So you're permitted to have this one, travel 2 stories down to is not permitted to get to an exit. So you've got, this is of course, if it's an occupied floor area. If this is an occupied floor area, definitely this area, you travel 1 story is permitted to an exit door. Level served by exit doorway, 1 exit is permitted. And from the basement, you travel not more than 1 story to get to an exit floor level, which leads you to an exit doorway. Here, because this 2 stories down is not permitted, you need, and if it's occupied, you need to make sure that you have a balcony. Travel 2 stories is permitted in this case. There are specific provisions to the balcony. Sorry about that. Page up. The window openings requirement provisions related to that. You always are permitted 1 story travel 1 up or down to get to a floor level leading to an exit. If you want to use these provisions, there is definitely provisions in the building code related to egress from dwellings. And Beryoska, you have a question.
Yeah, sorry, maybe I didn't get that, but do you have to meet both of these provisions to have a operable window of certain size and balcony in order?
Egress from I mean from bedrooms, you always need an egress window.
But yeah, I'm just saying, what if you only meet one provision and have balcony? Are you still allowed to go 2 flights of stairs to your exit door?
Oh yeah, because your balcony is considered a means of egress for you.
So it's either window or balcony.
No, it's not either or. The balcony is required. The egress door is always required. So if this area is occupied and you want to go down 2 levels, and this area, you need to provide a balcony for this area. So let's go to the provision related to that. That's in 9.9. So 9.99, egress from dwelling units and egress from bedrooms. Egress, if you look at 9910.1, it's a separate provision than 999. Except where the suite is sprinklered, each bedroom or combination bedroom shall have at least one outside window or exterior door openable from outside. So there's the egress windows. Now, if you're looking at if you're looking at 99, maybe you're confusing that with, so that provision applies all the time, right? For windows, for bedrooms. Maybe you're looking at the 99912, where a dwelling unit is not located above or below another suite. The travel limit from a floor level into in the dwelling unit to an exit or egress door may exceed 1 story, where the floor level is served by an openable window providing an unobstructed opening of not less than 1 meter in height and 0.5 millimeter width. Oh, that's the one. Sorry about that. And located so that the sill is not more than 1 meter above the floor and 7 meter above ground level. The travel limit from a floor level in a dwelling unit to an egress may exceed 1 story where that floor level has direct access to a balcony. So it's not and or it's not and, it's or, like you were saying, and Berioska. But
Okay.
you still need the egress windows in accordance with 9910. So in this
So in
case,
any way, you will have to have it. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
But
if
you
it
know,
is a bedroom, if it is a
eh,
bedroom.
yeah, if it is a bedroom, so you need
So
to have it,
yeah.
but it's not as big,
Yeah.
right? So
Which
in this
provision
case,
was that? The last one you just read?
okay,
What was the number?
that's in 991, 999
999.
2. So 9991 sentence 2.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. So if you have the balcony, you gotta be careful. This is I got confused by it, and apology for that, because in some other jurisdiction you will see provisions for balconies being required anyways. So take a look at. So don't get confused like I just did. You make sure that you read the provisions of your provincial code and make sure that there are differences between your provincial and the national codes in terms of those requirements. Some provincial codes have specific requirement for the balcony measurements, and the window provisions may have disappeared. So take a look at that. Except the egress from bedrooms is always there. Okay, so that's one we covered. Page down.
Sorry, just
Windows.
a quick
Yeah, go
question.
ahead, Danielle.
Um,
Go ahead.
yeah, hi, a general question. I really appreciate the illustrated building code diagrams, but I'm getting a little lost or confused without the reference to the specific sections of the code. Would it be
Okay.
possible to add to the presentation, like the associated code sections to the illustration?
Definitely. Sometimes I think you will find it, and sometimes you don't. So what I'll do is I'll make sure that it will be correct. It will be added to it and will be posted online. Okay.
Thank you so much. I'd really appreciate it.
Okay. So here we're looking at the means of egress, means of escape that open into a window well. It's a provision in again in 9910. In 9910, let's see the egress where okay, so that's 9910.1.3, where a window required in sentence 1 opens into a window well, a clearance of not less than 760 millimeters shall be provided from in front of the window. So that is in the egress from bedrooms, the requirement for windows, and if that is from window well, this is the clearances that it's required in front of the window opening, and that illustrates it for you there. 9910.1.3. 9912 lighting. The provisions apply to means of egress except those within dwelling units or a house with a secondary unit. Every exit public corridor providing access to exit for the public shall be equipped to provide illumination to an average level of not less than 50 lux at floor level or tread level, and at all points such as angles, intersection at changes of level where there are stairs and ramps. The minimum value of the illumination required in sentence 1 shall be not less than 10 lux. So this is typical lighting illumination levels. Emergency lighting 9912.3. Emergency lighting shall be provided in exit principal routes, providing access to exits in an open floor area. Somebody has his hand. Kastner. Is it Dan?
Sorry, I forgot to put it down.
Oh, sorry about that, Donna. Okay. Emergency lighting shall be provided from a source of, so we said the emergency lighting needs to be provided in exit, principal routes providing access to exits in open floor areas, corridors used by the public, underground walkways, and public corridors. Emergency lighting shall be provided from a source of energy separated from the electrical supply for the building. Emergency lighting shall be designed to be automatically actuated for a period of at least 30 minutes when electrical lighting in an affected area is interrupted. And the illumination levels is an average level of not less than 10 lux at floor level and not less than 1 lux minimum value. So let's see. So this is emergency lighting. We went through for egress and areas leading to access to egress, illumination levels. We looked at some of the means of egress, especially for houses, what is allowed for houses. Normally you need two exits from a space and from a floor area. There are some exceptions for single exits, and these are all in 9.9. We have not looked at all 9.9 provisions related to exits. That's 9.98, that's exits from floor areas. We've given some examples of those provisions. So we go through 9.98 for exits from floor areas in details to look up for that. Fire protection and life safety. This is fire protection systems and life safety system, whether it's fire alarms, sprinklers provisions, detection systems, extinguishers, provisions for access for fire department. Fire alarm systems, and this is interesting. In every building that contains more than 3 stories, including stories before the grade level. Can somebody explain this one to me? When we're looking at building height, we look at the building height from what level to what level?
The building height is from the first floor above grade.
Okay, so the building height is from the first floor is above grade level, the first story. Yeah, so from a first story up. But here, when we're looking at the building and when a fire alarm system requirement, we're looking at the number of stories in the building, including stories below grade level. So even though the building height is it's 3 stories, because obviously we are in Part 9 building, it cannot be more than 3 stories. You might have different levels below grade, and the building height will be added with the number of stories of those below levels will be counted when you're looking at the provision of fire alarm. Is that clear for everyone? No question there? Okay. So with a total,
just to be clear, so if you have
yeah.
a 3-story building plus a basement,
That's
That's
for
when the fire alarm kicks
yeah,
in.
that kicks in. Where the total level occupant load is more than 300. Okay. Where the residential occupancies have 10 or more sleeping accommodations. Maher, you have a question?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, yeah. In group D, E occupancies with 150 occupants located above or below the first story. So you ignore the first story and you look at the number of occupants above or below and see if it is more than 150. Okay. So if you have above 100 and you have below 50, it doesn't count. You gotta have either above 150 above or above 150 below, and then it counts. If in F3, oh, sorry, in F2 and F3 occupancies, sorry about that, that should be, oh, here it is. In F2 and F3 occupancies with 75 occupant load above or below the first story. Okay. Exceptions. So even we have those requirements, I have an exceptions. In buildings in which NFPA 13D sprinkler system has been installed, in buildings that contain fewer than 9 sprinklers, in residential occupancies where the exit or corridor leading to an exit serves no more than 4 suites, and each suite has access to an exterior exit facility. So if I'm in a residential occupancy, I have a basement, and I have suites where the exit or the corridors leading to the exit serve no more than 4 suites, or each suite has access to an exterior facility, even though I have 4 levels for the requirements to kick in, I don't need to provide a fire alarm system. Is that exception clear? Okay, no question. Where a fire alarm is required, so I'm looking at 9.10.18.4, where a fire alarm is required, smoke detectors shall be installed in every public corridor serving residential occupancy, every exit stair shaft, and recirculating air handling ducts serving more than one suite and more than one floor. If a building is not sprinklered and a fire alarm is required, a fire detector shall be installed in storage rooms not within dwelling units, service rooms not within dwelling units, janitors' rooms, rooms in which hazardous substances are used or stored, elevator hoistways, chutes and dumbwaiter shafts, laundry rooms in buildings of residential occupancies, but not within the dwelling units themselves. So this is provisions for fire detectors and for smoke alarms, which are the typical smoke alarms that you see in houses that you would put them in. You would put them in each dwelling unit, in each sleeping room, not within a dwelling unit, ancillary spaces and common spaces, not in dwelling units, in a house or a secondary, or in a house in a secondary with a secondary unit. So these are the requirements for smoke alarms. We saw the requirement for fire detectors. We saw that where the fire alarm is required, where to put smoke detectors. We looked at the provision of fire alarms. In part 9, for firefighting provisions, we have the requirements of 9.10.21, windows or access panels where they are required, access to basement for fire department access to buildings, portable extinguishers are required in certain conditions, and freeze protection is required for fire protection systems. So I can continue these. You can read these on your own, or we can go over some of them if you have any question on any of the provisions related to those. Let's see, that we went pretty quickly. So this is 425. So let's take a look at some of these. Sometimes we go very quickly and sometimes we don't. Okay, so let's go over some of the provision for exits, unless you want to look at something else. Would you like to go over the provision for exits from buildings, or you want to go through the firefighting provisions? It's up to you guys. There is an illustrated user's guide for part 9, part 3, and I referenced it It's the 1995 one. It is published and you can download it. You know, like you can download all the codes except I think the guides. The guides are at cost, but you can download the codes from the website, from the NRC's website. You have just to, you know, you have to log in, and they allow anybody to log in for in their system, and you can download it. The part 3 provisions, there is a guide. It's the 1995. You gotta be careful. 1995 edition is different than of the building code, is different than the 2015 edition. However, a lot of the concepts are presented in illustrations, and you can use those to guide you and in terms of understanding. So the majority is for exits. Let's go for exits. And what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna go into the building code to look at exits. Okay, maybe it's faster this way. No, page up. Uh-huh. So we looked at the purposes, dimensions, fire protection of exits. Okay. Okay, so let's do this. Access to exits, okay? Egress from roof area, podiums, terraces, platforms, and contained open spaces. An access to exits shall be provided from every roof intended for occupancy. Remember, an access to exit is not necessarily an exit, it's an access to exits. It could be a door leading to a floor below, which is provided with an exit. An access to exit shall be provided from every roof intended for occupancy or from every podium, terrace, platform, or contained open space. So what is that? And the clarification to 9947 is good also. We will go to that after we finish exit. Is that okay, Morgan?
Yep.
Okay,
Thanks.
remind me if I forget. Okay. So where a roof is intended for an occupied load of more than 60 people, more than 60 persons, at least 2 separate means of egress shall be provided from the roof or stairs designed in conformance with the requirements for exit stairs located remote from each other. So when you have more than 60 people on your roof, then you need 2 separate means of egress shall be provided, designed in conformance with the requirements of exit stairs, and they need to be remote from each other, similar to what exits need remoteness. Where a podium, terrace, platform contained open space is provided, egress requirements shall conform to the appropriate requirements for rooms or suites. So egress. So where you're looking at rooms or suites in Article 9974. So means of egress from suites, except as required in 99931, each suite in a floor area occupied by more than one suite shall have an exterior exit doorway, or a doorway to a public corridor, or a doorway to an exterior passageway. So if I have as each suite, so that's an independent suite, suites need to be separated from each other. Each suite shall have either an exterior exit door, or it can have a doorway leading to a public corridor, and a public corridor leads to exits, or a doorway to an exterior passageway. The exterior passageway is considered an exit. The exterior passageway will lead also to exterior stairs, so it will be protected exterior passageway. Except as provided in sentence 99731 9982, this is from the point where a doorway described in 1B or C, so where you'll go into a public corridor exterior passageway, where the point of you enter those public corridor exterior passageway, it shall be possible to go in opposite directions to two separate exits. So that's when you need protection for corridor and exterior passageway. And when you do that, they also need to lead you in opposite directions to two separate exits. So these are suites provisions for means of egress from suites. Dead-end corridors, except for dead-end corridors that's entirely within a suite, and except as permitted in 99921, a dead-end corridor is permitted provided it's not more than 6 meters long. Let's double check what 99.21 is. Did I put something wrong? Maybe it doesn't like this 1 point here. Did we do something here? Why is it not liking it? Ah, I know why. Because it won't see it that way. It will see it like this. Okay, there it is, 9921. Okay, where an egress door from a dwelling unit opens onto a public corridor, exterior passageway, it shall be possible from the location where the egress door opens into the corridor, exterior passageway, to go in opposite directions to two separate exits, unless the dwelling unit has a second and separate means of egress. So we said before, so for all suites, we need to either have an exterior exit or access to a public corridor or a passageway leading to two exits in opposite ways. However, for a dwelling unit, that exit passageway or public corridor do not need to provide access to exits in opposite directions if the dwelling unit itself has a second and separate means of egress. This does not apply to other occupancies, and you need to be very careful with applying this to anything other than dwelling units. So we take a look at that. So where you've got a public corridor, it needs to provide access to exits in opposite directions. Same thing with exterior passageway, unless you have, it serves only dwelling units, okay? And if when it serves dwelling units, it does not need to, only when the unit has access to another exit, to a separate means of egress. So you've got separate exits from within the unit.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just wondering why the dead-end corridor clause would point us to that. I don't quite see the correlation.
Okay, so a dead-end corridor is permitted provided it is not more than 6 meters long. So in this case, this is telling you you can have, except for dead-end corridors that is entirely within a suite, except as permitted. So you can go into a dead-end corridor that is because you have access to you have access to an exit from that corridor, and you have access from within the suite to another exits. You see what I mean? Because then from within the exit, you have independent means from outside the corridor.
But then it's not dead end.
Then the dead end, there is dead end in the corridor because you don't, because if you go into the corridor, you have one way, one exit coming from it, going from it, and then a dead end part of it. But your room has also access separately from the corridor to an exit. Because that's the only condition that's only allowed for dwelling units. So let's see if
I think I get it now.
So I
like
have,
you can exit your suite into that
yes,
dead
I
end
can't draw here. I cannot draw
and
here.
go in one direction. I think I get it now.
Yeah, if there is a dead end in the corridor, now that dead end corridor exists. Why? Because it told us that you can go the passageway or the corridor normally need to provide exits on both in opposite directions, right? So that's the normal condition. But then that doesn't need to do so if you have for dwellings. So now I'm closing one area and keeping another area. If the dwelling unit itself, from the dwelling unit, you have access to an independent means of egress from the corridor or the passageway. So you might end up with a dead end condition. Okay? So a dead end condition is permitted within a suite. And if it's not within a suite, it has to be 6 meter unless except as permitted in 99921, where it would be you have a corridor servicing multiple suites, and that dead end, each suite that is serviced by that corridor, it might have a dead end. There's no limits on it. However, each suite has an independent access to an exit. Now, there is other conditions that will play into this because the length of the corridor is impacted by the travel distance, and then you have limitations on travel distance on how much you can travel from one door of the suite to the exits. So all that interplays together, and that's why we need to read the provisions related to means of egress all together in order to look at the provision and how they work together. Now, number of spacing of egress doors, and this is egress doors from spaces and rooms. Except for dwelling units, at least 2 egress doors shall be provided when the area of a room or suite or the distance measured from any point within the room or suite to the nearest egress doors exceeds the values in table 9974. So we need to have at least 2 egress doors except for dwelling units, and they shall be spaced in the event that one door is made inaccessible by fire. The other door will provide safe egress. So let's take a look at 9974. 9974 is telling us that I need, except for dwelling units, if I am in a group C building, I've got a maximum area of 100 square meter. I need 2 egress door, more than 100 square meter, I need 2 egress doors. If the maximum distance to an egress door, so these two need to be met to allow a single means of egress. If I exceed them, I need 2 egress doors. For group D, I can have up to 200 square meters and a maximum distance to an egress door of 25. I need only 1 egress door. If I exceed any one of those two, then I need 2 egress doors. And again, we know that for 60 meters, then for 60 persons, we need 2 egress doors for 60 occupants. So that's for egress doors and for mezzanines and rooms. And the table 9974 is the allowances for single means of egress from those rooms. Required access to exit from suite shall not be through any other dwelling unit, service room, or other occupancy. So if you have suites, you cannot go through the dwelling unit of another occupant. You cannot go through the service room for the building. You cannot go through another occupancy of the building. So if you have a kitchen serving a building of residential occupancy, your occupants cannot go through the kitchen, right, to get to an exit. Same thing, you cannot have your occupants go through the assembly areas in the building, or they cannot or a cafeteria that serves only the residential occupants of the building, or you cannot go through service rooms. So this is independent access of exits. Gotta be careful with that. Travel distance within rooms and suites, except for dwelling units, the travel distance from any point within the room or suites to the nearest egress door shall not exceed the maximum travel distance in Article 9982. And this is telling you when you have the travel distance, except for dwelling units, always except for dwelling units, when you have you need to make sure that your maximum travel distance from any point in the room to the nearest egress door to not be more than that required for travel distance to an exit door. So that's so you double up the distance to an exit. 9982, if you look at the table 9982, where is that? Here. So even if when you have egress doors for other than dwelling units, those egress doors needs to be placed at no more than 30 meter for all occupancies, except for business and personal services occupancies that travel distance can be 40 meter. And if the building area is sprinkler, they can be 45 meters. So these are the travel distance from a room. Also, they are required for the travel distances for to an exit. So the travel distance for an exit can be provided can be measured from a protected corridor. So the openings into the protected corridor, into the for fire separated compartments, into the corridor, and then you measure travel distance from the door of the corridor. Or you can, or if that corridor is not separated, you need to measure it from the inside of the unit. So this is the measurement of the travel distance. Travel distance means the distance from any point in the floor area to an exit measured along the path of exit travel. We know that from the previous course we took on part 3. When a room or suite is separated from the remainder of the floor area by a fire separation having a fire resistance rating of at least 45 minutes, or in a sprinklered assembly, is a sprinklered building by a fire separation which is not required to have a fire resistance rating, the travel distance may be measured from an egress door of the room or suite to the nearest exit. So this is giving you a leniency of the building code that if your building is sprinklered, you have a fire separation with no fire rating, and in the building which is sprinklered, your travel distance can be measured from the egress door of the suite to the exit, to the nearest exit. You'll always measure travel distance to the nearest exit, okay? Now, where you have also a floor area with the suite separated by fire separation, and the room is also separated by fire separation of not less than 45 minutes, then you can also measure the travel distance from the door of the room or the door of the suite to the nearest exit, and that's your travel distance. So you have two measurements of travel distance. You need to double check your travel distance within the room to the egress door, and you need also to double check your travel distance from the door of the room to the exit if you have a sprinklered building, or if you have the compartment of the unit is a compartment 45-minute separation, or the room is a compartment 45-minute separation. If there is no 45-minute separation and no sprinkler, your travel distance must be measured from the inside of the room to the nearest exits. Where a public corridor is not less than 9 meters wide and conform to subclauses 34251D to D4, this is mall buildings, retail in malls, the travel distance may be determined in accordance with subclauses. So the travel distance may be much longer where we have public corridors that is not less than 9 meters wide and conforms to Part 3 provisions for malls. Berioska, yes?
Just a quick question. I'm always confused with this. In terms of exits, are we talking about the exits as a door or exit area? For example, if the door of certain from, let's say we are measuring the distance from the door of the suite to the lobby area, which constitutes the exit. I mean, it's a part of exit. So do we measure to
lobby, or not the lobby area? You measure it to. So if you have the entrance is designed as an exit, you measure it to the exit door. So in this case, the exit door, exterior door.
So it would be the door itself,
Yes.
not
Yes.
not the area that leads
No.
towards that door. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So except I've provided in sentence 2 and subsection 999, which is dwellings, at least 2 exits shall be provided from every floor area, and they shall be spaced so the travel distance to the nearest exit is no more than those distances. And then a single exit, except as provided in subsection 999, a single exit is permitted from each story in buildings of 1 and 2 stories in building height, provided the floor area and travel distance requirements conform to those required in Article 9974, and the total occupant load served by an exit facility does not exceed 60%. So this one is a single exit is permitted from each story in buildings of 1 and 2 stories in building height, and provided the floor area and the travel distance requirement conform to those required in Article 9974, and the total occupant load served by an exit facility does not exceed 60 persons. So if I have 9974, yeah, if I have 9974, I am permitted a single exit. Remember, 9974 was for single means of egress from rooms, suites, and mezzanines. But I can use it also for determining in up to two-story buildings. I can use these if my building floor area is not more than this, and a maximum distance to an egress door is not more than that, then I can provide a single exit if the total occupant load is served by the exit facility is not than 60%. So if I have areas on floors that do not exceed those areas in 9974, I do not have 60%, more than 60 persons in those areas. I've cut the travel distance that meet the 9974 to my exit, then that one single exit is sufficient for that area. Otherwise, I need two exits. Exiting through a lobby. This is where the lobby shall conform to all respect for exit except that rooms that other than the service doors are okay. The lobby shall be not more than 4.5 meter above grade, and the path of travel through the lobby to the outdoor shall not exceed 15 meter. So not more than one exit from a floor area above or below the first story permitted to lead through a lobby. Remember, not more than one exit from one floor area above or below the first story is permitted to lead through a lobby. The lobby has certain provisions, and the path of travel through a lobby to the outdoors, meaning to the exterior, shall not exceed 15 meter. So you will design the lobby to meet certain aspects of requirement for exits. However, the actual exit itself is the exterior door from the lobby, and that needs to be within 15 meter. And the only reason you're protecting the lobby is because you have one exit from the floor area above or below the first story is opening onto the lobby. So you cannot have more than one exit from the floor area above the lobby to exit through the from the lobby. You cannot have more than one exit to lead discharge onto the lobby. It's just only one exit if for the areas above can lead. And if you have multiple exits, there's still one exit that can lead through the lobby. You have to, and in that case, you need to protect the lobby in accordance with 9985. And these are similar concepts that we have seen in part 3. Mezzanine exits, it's similar to part 3. The means of exit from mezzanine, let's see, the space above a mezzanine shall be served by means of egress leading to exits accessible at the mezzanine levels on the same basis as floor areas. Now you've got exceptions. If the mezzanines is less than, the occupant load is less than 60, the mezzanine is not required to terminate a vertical fire separation. The area of mezzanine does not exceed the area limit in table 9974, and the distances stated in 9974 are met from any point of the mezzanine to an egress door on an egress stairway leading to an access to exits in the space below, if that space is provided with served with 2 or more egress doorways. So mezzanines is pretty straightforward, with similar to mezzanines from other floor areas. Except that provided incentives to the maximum travel distance from any point on a mezzanine to the nearest exit shall be not more than 40, 45, and 30. So again, the travel distances from any point of a mezzanine to the nearest exits is similar to any point from any floor area. Maher, go ahead.
Yeah, the question that I have is calculating the distance. Is it from the door to the exit or from the furthest point of the certain space?
The furthest point of the space to the exit. And we looked at the doors only for the protected suites, or a building that is provided with sprinkler protection, or if you have the suite is compartmentalized with and it's served by a corridor leading to 2 exits, and then you can calculate the travel distance from the door of the suite if it's a fire compartment of not less than 45 minute fire resistance.
Okay, thank you.
So this one is egress from dwelling units. every dwelling units containing more than one story shall have exits or egress doors located so that it shall not be necessary to travel up or down more than one story to reach a service level, a level serviced by an egress door to a public corridor, an enclosed stair or exterior passageway, or an exit doorway not more than 1.5 meter above adjacent ground levels. So except as provided in sentence 2 and 3. So normally dwelling units requiring with more than one story needs to have exits or egress doors located so you don't have to travel up or down more than one story to reach a level serviced by a egress door with a public corridor or an exit or exterior passageway or an exterior doorway. Now you can have, like with the illustration, this is basically the provision related to the illustration where a dwelling unit is not located above or below another suite. So you cannot have, this provision does not apply to dwelling units stacked above each other. Okay, it only applies to row houses, houses where, or single family house where you have there is the travel limit from a floor level in the dwelling unit to an exit or egress door may exceed one story where the floor level is served by an openable window or a balcony. Okay. So the provisions, recordings are okay. All right, Matt, you have a question?
Yeah, can we just jump back to the questions in the comments? I had an earlier question about townhomes, and then there was the one about 9.9.4.7.
Okay, let's see. Can you lead me? I see the one, if rows of 10 houses, you need a firewall every 2 units.
Yeah.
If they have secondary units, right?
Or even if they don't.
If they don't, no. If they don't, no. The fire. Okay, so are you talking about parties, fire separation of 1 hour versus firewall provisions?
Exactly. So can you have 3 in a row just divided by party walls?
3 in a row divided. No, that's the when we're talking about the firewall separations. Let's take a look at that.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
I'm just trying to understand like the practical application of that.
So because this one is basically we're looking at 9, 10, 11, 2, where the firewalls are not required. Where a building or residential occupancy contains more than 2 houses, a party wall. So if you had more than 2 houses, that separates 2 adjacent houses with a secondary unit from the rest of the building shall be constructed as a firewall to create separate buildings, each containing no more than 2 adjacent houses with a secondary suite. This is what we've seen it. And I think this is where it is where we set it, where it needs to be constructed as a firewall with a secondary suite. We can double check that. We can go to 9.11.2. 9, 10, 11, 2. Where is that? Okay. A party wall on a property line of a building of residential occupancy need not be constructed as firewall, provided it is constructed as a fire separation not less than 1 hour, where the party wall separates 2 dwelling units, where there's no dwelling unit above another dwelling units. A dwelling unit in a house with a secondary suite, including their common spaces, or 2 houses with a secondary suite, including their common spaces. So if I have 2 dwelling units where there is no dwelling unit above or another dwelling unit, I can use a party wall. I can use a dwelling unit in a house with a secondary suite, including their common spaces, or 2 houses with a secondary suite, including their common spaces. Where a building or residential occupancy contains more than 2 houses, a party wall that separates any adjacent 2 houses with a secondary suite from the rest of the building shall be constructed as a firewall to create separate buildings, each containing no more than 2 adjacent houses with a secondary suite. So this one, this is the only time where you control the number. So if you have houses with no secondary suites, your area of the building can be up to 300 square meter to 600 square meters, and then you put a firewall, and you have multiple residential buildings. But if you have the secondary suites inside of them, you don't want to have more than 2 adjacent houses with secondary suites next to each other, and then you put a firewall. So you want
I understand now.
so
Yeah.
you separate the secondary suites. That's what it is.
Got it.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, you said there was another question. Anybody? Matt, that's your hand, right? Oh, I don't want to go there. Okay. All right, 2 separate exits. So we looked at the egress. Okay, so we looked at the exits from houses, and we looked at the exits from dwelling units. Where dwelling unit is not located, we looked at that. We looked at 2 separate exits, except for dwelling units in a house with a secondary suite, where an egress door from a dwelling unit opens into a public corridor or exterior passageway. We read that one. It shall be possible from the location where the egress doors open into the corridor or exterior passageway to go in opposite directions to 2 separate exits, unless the dwelling unit has a second and separate means of egress. Okay, we read that. Shared egress facilities, except for dwelling units in a house with a secondary suite, dwelling unit shall be provided with a second and separate means of egress, where an egress door from the dwelling unit opens an exit stairway serving more than 1 suite, a public corridor serving more than 1 suite and served by a single exit, an exterior passageway serving more than 1 suite served by a single exit and ramp, and more than 1.5 meter above adjacent ground. So these are all a balcony serving more than 1 suite, and single by a servant exit, and more than 1.5 meter above adjacent ground level. So this is basically your shared exit egress facility is restating the other provisions related to single egress, but when you are provided with an exit stairway serving within more than 1 suite, then they should have a separate means of egress, unless you have a public corridor that gives access in 2 separate ways. If it gives access to only one way to an exit, then they need to have their secondary exit. Same thing for balconies. If it's balconies serving more than 1 suite, then each suite needs to have access to another means of egress. Where a dwelling unit is located above another dwelling unit or common space in a house with a secondary suite, the upper dwelling unit shall be provided with a second and separate means of egress when an egress door from the dwelling opens onto an exterior passageway that has a floor assembly, and then it's got special provisions for the separation of that exit for the dwelling above in order to protect it from a fire from the unit below. So these are 2 dwelling units, one located above each other, or common space, or located above a common space in a house with a secondary unit. Then the dwelling unit above needs to have a separate means of egress that is going through an exterior passageway, or that is protected from the floor assembly and from the area below. Okay, and then this one is egress from bedroom, outside window, and exterior door openable from the inside. And then we've got, so these are provisions for bedrooms. They apply to all bedrooms except where the building is sprinklered. Okay. And signs, I've got signs, visibility of signs. With that, we have finished the requirements for exits, but of course there is the signature is required. The whole section of 9.9 gives you the requirements for exit signature, exit lighting, and so on in terms of facilities for safe egress from the building. It's 5 o'clock. We finished module 2. Everything is recorded, and we will be Camille will be forwarding those. It will be available for just forwarded a text message here and in chat, and she confirmed that they'll be available up to 10 from 5 to 10 business days after the event. So they will be available. Morgan and Maher, you have questions? Go ahead, Morgan.
Hi, I just was hoping that you could touch on 9947, the stairway in a two-story building. I'm really unclear on, or maybe give an example of what that might be.
Yeah, 9947, let's see. 9947, you said?
Yes, 9947.
Okay, this one. Stairways in 2 stories, group D or E buildings. Okay, we're a suite of, let's read that. We're a suite of group D or E occupancy. So you've got offices or mercantile occupancy is located partly on the first story or partly on the second story. Stairways serving the second story of that suite need not be constructed as exit stairs provided. So you've got the suite, and the suite is on 2 levels, is on both stories. So this it's occupying 2 stories of the building. The stairways serving the second story of that suite need not be constructed as exit stairs, provided the building is not more than 2 stories in building height. The suite is separated as a fire compartment, separated from all other occupancies by 45-minute fire separation. The area occupied by the suite is no more than 100 square meter per story. Yeah, and when you're looking, the maximum travel distance from any point of the suite to an exterior exit is not greater than 25 meter. The floor assemblies have a fire resistance rating of not less than 45 minutes or are of non-combustible constructions. And the basement and first story are separated by a fire separation having a fire resistance rating of not less than 45 minutes. So this is 9947. So if it's the basement and the story above, it's if on 2 levels and it's occupied, you know, with the story with on a basement and another story, you gotta also make sure that the basement is separated. If it's on the 2 story, it's occupied on the second story and the first story, there is that whether there is separation or not, that depends on the table that we looked at today in terms of fire separations requirement for floors in group D and group E occupancies. But the stairs that you don't need to provide the exit stair, the stairway serving the second story need not be constructed as exit stairs. So that story above, you don't need to construct them as exit stairs because your travel distance from the suite, meaning from the second story, which is the furthest one away, to an exterior exit is not more than 25 meter. And it's a very small area. You've got 100 meters squared each in terms of story. And the suite is separated from other areas of the building by 45-minute separation. You already have your floors fire separation because of the requirements for floors in group D and E buildings, and it's no more than 2-story in building height. So you're going down 1 floor level, and you don't need to construct your exit stair in terms of you don't need to construct it as an exit stair. You just construct it as a stair, and it can as long as it leads to the outside from if you can go to the outside for a distance of no more than 25 meter.
Okay, so you don't need another exit stair from the second floor.
No,
like that's it.
I mean, it's not about the number of exit stairs. It's about the exit stair, construction itself. It does not need to be constructed as an exit stairs. The number of stairs is it's really. Okay. I think the 100 square meter is within the table, right? So we take a look at the table, and for number of single exits permitted, and I think 100 meter is less than 200 square meters. So you from in terms of exit stairs, let's see here. 999. It's really about the construction of the exits, not the number of exits. The number of exits in 999.
Okay, that makes sense too.
Yeah. Yeah. So take a look
And-
at the number of stairs provisions, but the construction of the stair itself does not need to be constructed as an exit stair.
Okay. And then there could be additional space outside of that suite, but it's just talking about a stair within that particular suite.
Particular, yeah.
So the build or the floor could be bigger than 100 square
Exactly.
meters, but
Yeah.
the suite isn't. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maher, you had a question?
Yes, I do. Actually, I'm wondering, are we going like during tomorrow's modules, are we going to make some practice on types of questions and stuff like that, or no?
You have your quizzes. I would like to get your feedback at the beginning of the session tomorrow on the quizzes. Yeah, and we'll go over them. If you
Okay.
have any questions on them, you do the quizzes for module 1 and 2, and we can look at them tomorrow before we start the session, module 4.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. Any other question? Otherwise, we're gonna log off. Any questions? All right. Oh, you're very welcome, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you. We hope that you've enjoyed this session. For additional continuing education opportunities, visit the www.raic.org/continuingeducation.